don't have to look anymore now that I've seen you. I don't have to dream anymore now that you came true. I'm already yours. I don't have to look anymore now that I've seen you. I don't have to dream anymore now that you came true. I'm already yours. I'm already yours. I don't have to look anymore now that I've seen you. I don't have to dream anymore now that you came true. I'm already yours.
Is it just me, or is that a great song? It's probably just me, you know. But what are you gonna do? I went through the trouble to have it done, and then I mean, I did the lyrics some time ago. I was all hung up on this girl. There's actually more lyrics to it, and I only found it in one of my old files some time ago. I was like, damn it. But I didn't save the song on Suno, so I probably can't redo it to kind of make it longer and stuff. Oh man. Now all is lost. Hey, Nodax here, and he says hit the like button. That's probably a good idea. Probably a good idea. All right, so I'm just going to draw stuff. What am I going to draw? Well, maybe I shouldn't. But, well, I'm going to and weigh in on this. I do have it set up in Rumble Studio for Super Tip, so it should work. So should you be so kind as to avail that, that'd be nice. But anyway, there we go. There's Super Tip. All right. I'm going to draw 4 characters. No, they're real people that are somewhat notable. And 3 of which I've always had a huge amount of respect for and looked up to. In one case, that's changed. The 4th one I didn't really know a whole lot about. He's interesting, can be funny at times, but I really don't have any interest in the guy. And but we'll get into it. So what I'm going to do is do some caricatures, or attempt to. Sometimes I can hit it, and sometimes, no matter what I do, I get it wrong. But I'm going to draw Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, and Nick Fuentes. Yes. So that's what the show will be. I'll be talking about that stuff. By now, you got to be tired of hearing about it, but, well, it's what I'm going to do. So Tucker, we'll start with Tucker, and I'll try to do one of the standard imagery of Tucker for a long time is that sort of dumbfounded look he would do. And it's just too easy. So I figure, so I'll take the easy way. Be lazy about it and draw him that way. the thing about Tucker is, he was riding high over at Fox News, and he had their most popular show, and kind of saved them because their top show had been Bill O'Reilly. And then he got Me Too'd. I think I think part of the problem was he was having an affair with one of his commentators. I think that was supposed to be Lise Will, I believe. But there were other allegations which went nowhere, really. And I think one of the women who was accusing him got busted in some sort of fraud thing. It didn't have anything to do with him, but, someone took an opportunity to, and this happens, especially Me Too was pretty much all about that. Certainly in Hollywood and stuff, where someone saw, hey, if I can get this idiot out of the way, I got an opportunity. But none of them had the talent and skill on par with the guy they got rid of. But anyway, Bill was gone, and they had a problem. They had this hole to fill, and Tucker had already had his show going, and so he kind of just fell into place. And but he delivered and brought it back, and so they recovered what they had lost by dumping O'Reilly. And so he did a lot of good work for him. But as time went on, as he was kind of going against, the political class and the Republican part of that. So it's like the corruption in political class that exists is not just a Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is the power, or it was. Interesting times we're in now. Was the power of party, the party of power. Certainly for the last 100 years. One of the most effective presidents for the pursuit of power in the political class was Woodrow Wilson. Because he actually was able to amend the Constitution and get the income tax in there, and that was massive, and that sort of thing. And that was the original progressive movement. And man, I may have turned this upside down. Yep. See that? That's what I do. It's like I want their heads to, I don't know, putting tumors in people's heads or something. It's weird, but it's just something. Maybe I have the tumor. God, Lord, all this time. But so the power elites, and so for the most part, the Democrats got the power, and then a lot of Republicans, they would talk the talk but never walk the walk, and that sort of thing. And ultimately, they wanted their positions. They would probably, a lot of them would have rather have been Democrats, but those spots were taken, But once you get in, then you can sort of ride the gravy train to become, a millionaire, possibly multi-millionaire, without ever having really earned it or anything like that. And you get a certain phone numbers and whatnot, and then everyone's got to come to you if they want to navigate the protection racket that the corruption of government had created. And so you had a lot of Republicans who wanted that. And Tucker had been a part of this crowd, out of Washington and whatever. But at one point, he had enough of it. And it seems now, my best guess is the Iraq War really broke him. And a lot of people that he trusted and thought were, maybe obviously had flaws here and there, but for the most part, we're decent and whatnot. And then he was kind of like, well, they're really not. So, I understood that. So it's like the Iraq War. Well, what was it? That's why it's a baffling thing. For the longest time, I myself thought, well, this must be like a squeeze play on Iran. Because that was more of the threat. Iraq was, after the first Gulf War was nothing. Then we had, 9/11, and that begins that war. Then all of a sudden, we got to go to Iraq. It says, well, why? He's hiding the weapons of mass destruction. Now, the weapons of mass destruction was part of the ceasefire of the original Gulf War. He was supposed to catalog that, declare it, and get rid of it. And he was hemming and hawing about it. They got rid of some and all this sort of stuff, but there was still a lot of, he just didn't deliver on it. And so there was that. But ultimately, let's say they did find them. There was like a hidden, I don't know, warehouse buried or whatever, and it had them all. There they were, the VX nerve gas, all that stuff, ready to launch. You could fire it up and go. And so there it was, and he was in violation. So that's, the legality of it. Keep in mind, he had fired on the no-fly zone planes and stuff that this Saddam Hussein, so he was in violation of the treaty or ceasefire agreement almost from the get-go. But, mostly they would just send some bombs over, stuff like that, maintain the no-fly zone, whatever. But even if he had done that, it was like, well, what's he going to do? Is he really going to risk his own destruction out of spite? The only argument for it was that he did attempt to assassinate Papa Bush. So, was he that nutty to do something like that? But ultimately, it was never really a justification to go in, invade a country, shatter its state, granted a shitty criminal state, but it was the only governance they had, and then just high-five everybody, and that's that. You're taking on quite a bit. Still not quite getting his mouth right here. So it never really made sense, and no one's ever really answered it. Tucker now believes, apparently, that it was the Jews. It was that that's just what Israel wanted done. Well, how does that work exactly? Israel wanted a situation where the only buffer for Iran was Saddam Hussein, and that he, lied about what his stockpile really was, and kept them at bay lest they try anything. Because they had fought an 8-year war, it was brutal and nasty, and they almost lost it to this guy. So they really didn't like him. But somehow this was going to be an advantage of Israel because, the only thing that Iran and Saddam Hussein shared was their hatred of Israel. So, all right, you got that. And he was paying suicide bombers and stuff like that. And every now and then he'd launch something at Israel. But ultimately, how does that work out for him? It doesn't. And what did they get since? Now, one of the original things was, it was for the oil. Well, I guess the flow of the oil in the region and it's the shipping and whatnot. But it's pretty much like it always was. You didn't get anything. It's like Trump was always, let's get the oil. Did you give us the oil? And I was like, well, I can't really argue with it. It's a lot of trouble and you got nothing. Now, of course, individuals, certain companies and whatnot, were making bank over the situation. So the last thing you want to do is solve the problem because then you're not needed anymore. And this comes up all the time. It's like within the country, you have the scourge of the professional activist. And the worst thing that can happen for the professional activist is victory. Because then after that, you just go home and get on with your life. Get on with your life? What do you mean? Well, you get a job, you might meet a girl and raise a family. No, you don't understand. This is my life. So if the cause ends, the activism is no longer required. So a similar thing here. Well, good Lord, if the war ends, my ability to profit from it also ends. So it's probably all it was. Yeah, there were some idiots trying to suggest that somehow he was in cahoots with bin Laden and all that. No. So, but anyway, just the overall nastiness of that, and as well, we're gonna export democracy, and yeah, that's not really how that works. And try to compare it to the likes of Germany and Japan at the end of World War II. Uh, Not really the same circumstances. Certainly, with Japan, you could make an argument that that's a culture that's not similar to the West, and yet it was very successful. In a lot of ways, Japan was probably even more successful of, moving away from the imperial Japanese regime they used to be. Whereas now Germany, of course, got split in two thanks to the Soviets, and basically, West Germany was the success story, and then they merged, but the wounds of 50 years of suffering under Soviet-sponsored communism there sure did its damage, and they're still hurting from that. But anyway, it was an absurd notion of to jump into that. And if it had been a squeeze play on Iran, now that I would have understood. But then nothing happened. Iran was murdering American troops in Iraq. They sent their agents in there. They supplied weapons to whoever they could work with, whether it was Al Qaeda outfits or the Fedayeen or whoever. But it's predominantly a Shia country in Iraq. Saddam, of course, and his ruling Ba'athis were a Sunni, and Sunni Muslims don't get along with Shia Muslims. Probably a good bit of that is born out of Arabs historically don't get along with Persians, and so on and so forth. So, but nevertheless, well, they got this beautiful hatred of the Americans, and here's a chance to kill some of them. So, and plus, Iran wanted dominance in the region. So, that's an act of war. They were killing these Americans and all that. And so, if that was the objective, then, well, you can take advantage of that situation and just start attacking Iran, take out their nuclear facility, all that stuff. They didn't do it. So, why? Yeah, it's a mystery. I don't know. No one really ever addresses it. It's never really discussed. So I don't know what that was about. So anyway, jump quite a bit ahead, and there you got Tucker. Everything is, Israel's fault and all this stuff, and pounding the table that Trump better not give Netanyahu what he wants. And by the way, Netanyahu has been calling for the destruction of that facility forever. He didn't get it, and until now. And all right, so the big threat was this isn't going to go the way you think, and that it would be World War III. That literally, that was what Tucker and the like were saying. This is the threat. Didn't happen. Not even close. I mean, I would have thought there'd be a little more than what has happened in response by Iran, but they didn't. Oh yeah, and to be fair, World War III didn't happen because it already did, so it'd be more accurate to call it World War IV. See, World War III already happened. We just call it the Cold War. It's one of the strange ironies of human history that the doomsday weapon of the atomic bomb saved the world, or at least spared it or delayed a third world war. Because otherwise, oh, it would have happened. No doubt about it. Pretty much the same reason as World War II happened. You know, you got this unfinished business and grievances, and one war creates another, and so and so forth. Um, and so probably, I don't know, by the mid 60s, the war would have been on. It almost happened anyway. You know, you had the Cuban Missile Crisis and stuff like that. Plus, wars erupted despite that mushroom cloud casting a shadow over everything. And so basically, like North Korea and Vietnam and some of the skirmishes about Turkey and Greece and stuff, all those were the battles of World War III that we came to call the Cold War. And we called it that because we couldn't go full on, because then it would be annihilation. So the war was fought by the CIA and the KGB. The KGB is almost completely forgotten now. And that's rather significant, because several of their soldiers still exist. One in particular is at the seat of power in Moscow, and yet gets a pass for, reasons. Now, you take Ukraine, and that was another one Tucker weighed in on. A lot of people gave him crap for doing an interview with Vladimir Putin. And no, he can do an interview with Vladimir Putin. In fact, for someone in the journalistic business and whatnot, I would expect him to do that if it could happen. Sometimes Putin's just not going to talk to you. So he did it. It didn't amount to a whole lot. It wasn't that great of an interview. And 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 people getting crapping their pants over it, it was a bit much. Not a whole lot happened there. The thing he did afterwards was basically do, like, I don't know, a promo for Moscow tourism, praising how great Moscow was doing. And at the time, this was sort of like a dig of how crappy the Biden era was and stuff like that. And Biden was pushing the war in Ukraine when, we got our own problems here and you're doing all this. But still, there was ways to make the argument very easily without doing that. So then it's like, for the most part, he's saying you're being unfair to Tucker. He was not kissing Putin's ass or whatever. Well, not in the interview so much, but that. And then to act like it's so impressive. Now you can go through all kind of dictatorships where the capital city is immaculate. It's amazing. There's no crime and all that. And this late in the date, and especially someone of his age and experience, probably knows better than that, but did it anyway. So don't give him a pass on that one. Now, the Ukraine war and so on and so forth, of course, there was a promise made that in the 90s, hey, give up your nukes and don't worry, we got your back and all that. But the problem is, the United States had already been in a 20-year war that ended in surrender. It was some of the dark instances of America in recent years. It's like, I guess, because, the baby boomers always think everything is about them, even now as they're on their way out, but Watergate was the worst thing ever. And the Vietnam War was the worst thing ever. Well, for the longest time, especially in recent scandals, Watergate was child's play compared to, Obama and Biden. But also now, Vietnam is child's play compared to some of the crap going on, to the utilization of war to expand power and make money and all that sort of thing. Way worse now. And so you had, like I said, 20 years of this war that was so necessary, had to happen. And then it just ends with this pathetic rollout that really encapsulates the Biden presidency with what that is. That's way worse than the helicopters on the roof of the embassy in Saigon, where you're literally seeing dead bodies flapping in the landing gear on the planes escaping Afghanistan, and then people falling from the planes, splattering on the tarmac of the little airport they had there. Yeah, that's way worse. And then compound that with, well, we left all our weapons and material, and then Taliban got that, probably sold a good bit of it to China and that sort of thing. Well, at least at the end of Vietnam, they had the good sense to throw the helicopters into the ocean. That way no one could take that and use it, because they just didn't have the wherewithal to transport all that back to the mainland, or at least to Japan. So yeah, pretty bad. So after all that, you know what? Let's go to war with Russia. Then people can make all the arguments about the threat that Putin poses, Russian weapons. They supply the weapons for just about all the enemies we've had, so on and so forth. Keeps the grind going, in cahoots with China. And China, for whatever reason, keeps getting ignored by the likes of, Tucker and whatnot in these equations. But nevertheless, that's the problem. I mean, you're stuck there after that long of a run to end like that. And then, come on, guys, one more time. That's an almost impossible sell. So Tucker comes into this. So that's why he has some amount of credibility on it. His approach, no, he's made one mistake after another. He's become very bitter and angry and lashes out at former friends and allies. And he did get screwed by Fox News. That's true. He did. They ran him off out of there. Despite the fact that they took some arrows, almost literally, the crazy left, the nuts, went to his house, threatening his wife, who was home at the time. That's going to have a pretty big impact, But his overall view, I think, came out of the Iraq War, and he trusted some of these people, and he doesn't trust anyone anymore. It's my theory, my speculation. But there you go. So, but does that mean you have to be so broken that you now question the history of World War II? That's absurd. Well, look, he had the guy. Yeah, but he doesn't really engage. He doesn't, none of that. Well, bad things happened in World War II because, oopsie, the Nazis just didn't prepare good enough for the war. So they ran out of supplies and, they couldn't feed everybody. The records of those trains are clear. See, part of the problem with once it was obvious they weren't going to win this and the Russians were coming down hard on them, oh boy, did you have a massive punishment on the way. You needed everything you had to try to hope that you can fight it to a standstill. Now we got to keep those trains going to, take care of that problem. That's what they were doing. Madness, sure. Even then, still determined to kill Jews. There's no way around that. There's no way to explain why, But a lot of this comes out of how many years and stuff of different ethnicities using past grievances or horrors or what have you as a shield or as a means. And it leads to a certain amount of corruption. Someone uses it falsely. It's like when I was young and coming up, there was a lot of people my age and had the attitude that, well, why do we have to have affirmative action anymore? I didn't have anything to do with segregation and the wrongs that happened there, but I still got to pay a penalty for it. So, it immediately starts the trend of where, racism will fix racism. No, it won't. It just keeps it going. Now, of course, again, I go back to the professional activists. Good, because that's their gravy train. So, what are they going to do? I see it as a similar thing here when I get to Fuentes, primarily. I mean, Tucker is much older and that. So my guess is, a lot of that of the Washington intelligentsia that Tucker was part of, he feels betrayed by them, doesn't trust them, and that sort of thing out of Iraq War. And it's pushed him into this position. Now, the idea that the Jews are behind everything and he's danced around it. He did apologize recently because he made this, because really in his interview with Nick Fuentes, Tucker was worse than Nick. I mean, because he's the one who lashed out at Christian Zionists. He says, I despise them more than anyone. So then I think it was, Dave Smith. He was talking to Dave. He said, well, I want to walk that back. I was mad. But how do you get there? And he says, it's heresy and all this sort of stuff. Do you think Christian Zionists worship Jews? I mean, it was stupid, but and you got what's the definition of Zionism? Well, Zionism is, it's a nationalist movement, a nationalist for the Jewish state. Ironically enough, America First and everything is it's akin to a nationalist movement. It's like, I care about America. All right, there you go. That's, so for, Israelis to say, yeah, I'm all about Israel. Well, yes. Now the people says, well, wait a minute. What about Americans? So you've got Jews and you've got Christian Zionists, and they say, well, when you're at the point where you see the Israeli argument in it, and that's about as far as it goes, that's one thing. Now they're saying there's an undue influence. It's AIPAC. All right. So there's a lobbying entity, like so many others. One in particular, despite being openly adversarial to the United States, owns property in the United States, continues to buy farmland near military bases, but not one of them are Jewish, so we don't want to talk about it. It's impossible to avoid it. So why is that? How do you get there when you're going to ignore oceans of detail? It's not going to work. And yet, right for the moment, is the center of the universe discussion as far as the right goes. All of a sudden, when the left is on their knees, I mean, they're still burning down their own cities, New York, of course. What are you going to do? You knew it was going to happen. So but all these opportunities and strides, but it's almost as if, yeah, maybe somebody infiltrated. They said Nick Fuentes is a Fed. Tucker's, I thought you were a Fed. Maybe you both are, and this is the game. What have you? But he's just way off on this. And the thing about Tucker, it's hard to believe that he doesn't know any better. He does. So I gave my theory and speculation that, Iraq War really turned him. And, but that doesn't really explain it all. And so now the thing about him and Ben Shapiro and all that's personal between the two. And Tucker's a very arrogant man and doesn't like being questioned, really. That's clear. Now, for the most part, it was against lefties and everyone cheered him on, and all that. But where he dances around this and wink, wink, nudge, nudge, it's just not honorable. So, should he be condemned because he talked to Nick Fuentes? Absolutely not. This is your platforming. Nick Fuentes platformed himself in a large way. Yeah, he gets more interest, but the problem you have if you're going to scream about Tucker having him on the show, well, now aren't you I mean, I don't know. What are you going to do? And with the language of canceling, which Ben Shapiro did not do, I saw not Douglas Murray. Who said that? I can't remember. No, Douglas Murray was talking about Fuentes jumped on the bandwagon that perhaps Mossad had something to do with Charlie Kirk's death. Quite the opposite. Fuentes was condemning Candace Owens for wink, wink, nudge, nudge, insinuating that. And just the whole thing, I think some of his followers are upset with him about it. Could be wrong about that. But anyway, so I don't know what else. He may have to give Murray the idea that Fuentes was on board with that theory. But and he really did not like Charlie Kirk and all that sort of thing. And I'm sure, the feeling was probably mutual and what have you. But nevertheless, I didn't see. I saw the opposite, that he was like, yeah, no. He wasn't going to go for that one. Despite the fact that he's no fan of Israel, obviously. So there you go. It's sure an interesting thing. It's curious and bizarre in a lot of ways, which is why conspiracy upon conspiracy. There's gasoline for conspiracy theories all over the place, especially, like, again, 20 years of war that ends in surrender. Then, if you thought that was bad, then COVID happened. Oh, good Lord. So all the institutions within the United States are absolutely shattered. And that one shattered. The one thing, that may have still been left was medical science. It's just the corruption metastasized and was everywhere, to where even, people said, this is what it is. And from the get-go, Fauci's emails were public knowledge pretty quick. And still. And of course, the media. Now, the media is why it's so suffering and bleeding out now. That was the last straw when you did stuff like that. And so that's another thing that just shatters. So, where do you go? And so it says, gee, how can someone like Fuentes get possible? That's why. What am I supposed to do? Lie to you? That you create voids like that, and something's going to fill it. So yeah, people were upset about Tucker doing this, and that somehow this makes him responsible for Fuentes. But Fuentes had already been around, and they were aware of him, and all this sort of stuff. So Ben Shapiro does his take on it, and obviously no chance of him ever being a Fuentes fan. I know this shocked a lot of people. My goodness. But no, that wasn't going to happen. Now, Fuentes, in the talk with Tucker, he talks about the whole history of how he got started and all this. And apparently, while he was in college, he I can't remember exactly. Someone saw him talk, or maybe he was already streaming then. I can't remember. But they say, "Oh wow, this guy's pretty good." So, hey, would you be up for debating, someone on the left? And he said, "All right, sure." But the problem was, as typical with the left, they couldn't get anybody, and then eventually they did. So some guy said, "Yeah, I'll do it," and so it happened. And apparently, Nick mopped the floor with the guy. Which is why the others said, "Yeah, I ain't doing that." But this guy, they found the one dummy he thought he could win. So anyway, apparently Cassie Dillon saw this. I don't know if she was at the school or what, but saw it. I'm forgetting all the details. I'm sure it won't matter. But anyway, that was the deal. And this is what leads him eventually to Shapiro. Now, Shapiro, yeah. So, yeah. Well, Cassie was very impressed with Fuentes and saw potential in him, and so they corresponded. And one thing that set him off was she invited him to a trip to Israel, and he's whoa. So already he's kind of like, I'm just about America. So I mean, says all right. He didn't care to go to do the tour of Israel and all that, but I guess now in hindsight he sees that they were trying to recruit him into the, you know, it's like, well, you can go or not go. I mean, it's not, you know. So that was one thing he put in there, but that appears what he thinks. So then eventually he decides to tweet a question to Ben Shapiro. And because apparently this time, Cassie Dell and Ben Shapiro knew each other, and she apparently was talking up this guy, and maybe Shapiro thought, yeah, all right, maybe, I don't know. And so his question right off the bat is, I never see any articles in the Daily Wire that's critical of Israel. And Ben's immediate response was something that it was an anti-Semitic question, or it's a telltale sign of anti-Semitism or something like that. And so that's it. That's apparently like the origin of Nick Fuente. Because just to immediately accuse him, and that's how he put it, and that's always been the thing. For the basic logic of having a criticism of Israel does not necessarily mean that you have a problem just with Jews in general, which, even the most basic logic, not even Shapiro could argue. But it seems to the case of what Fuentes presents there, that's what happened, Now, of course, why would Ben Shapiro do that? Because he's heard this a million times, And they could have engaged or shown examples of, well, this one or that one. No big revelation that Shapiro is a Israel fan. But that doesn't mean you have justification of accusing him of being a traitor to the United States, that he's really just a Mossad agent, and America is just a means to an end, and ultimately Israel is what he's all about. Is that supposed to be the case? You don't really have anything there. Certainly not on that. That, well, Nick was pissed off at the response like that, I guess. But that was his case against Shapiro in the interview with Tucker. So, but still, it's like, don't you think that's probably the deal? I mean, he gets that every day, really. All his life. Because one of the things about Shapiro, when he talks about America and about what you should be doing, especially to the young and stuff like that, he tells, especially he was getting on. I remember he was doing a show and talking about how young men in America are lost and the woke era has done damage and makes them feel, put upon and locked out of the mainstream and whatnot, which is true. Even especially in school and stuff, the emphasis was on girls until the trans movement came along. But stuff like that. And his advice for what you need to do is go to church. He just said it immediately. And he didn't say synagogue. I mean, if you're Jewish, but he's assuming, because he understands majority of America is Christian. So he says, you need to go to church. So it's supposed to be like that he hates Christians. He doesn't really like them. He doesn't respect them. He's an Orthodox Jew. He does not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. I do believe Jesus was the Messiah, but Ben doesn't. I don't get to decide the fate of Ben's soul, you know. So it's not for me to do that. And I don't, I'm not God. I don't know the ultimate plan of the universe and everything else. I know morals. I know justice. I know the 10 Commandments. So do I have to, demand if you don't, well, then, if you don't do that, then that's enough to accuse someone. Says, hey, come on, I'm not anti-Semitic. Well, if that's the metric, how are you not? If it's like, well, he doesn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God and all that. And that's it. I can't have anything to do with this guy. Well, good Lord. So, but curious that that's Ben Shapiro's overall advice to young Americans. Go to church. Because that's where you get, your moral foundation, because of the decline of the Christian church, specifically in America, has, you can see, you didn't replace it with anything, pop culture and porn, and then the false idiot con and promise of communism and Marxism and whatnot, that hey, there's free shit to be had. Turns out it's all full of shit. But it was in the term. So that's his response. This is what you need to do, and you need to go to Israel and and understand Judaism is the way of the world. You need to convert. That's not what he did. So, you can go through things like you didn't like what he said here, or you didn't like his stance there. He thought the vaccine was a thing. Lots of people did, even doctors. But of course, doctors are not in the labs. They are not the researchers. And that's what I mean why it's a really, really serious, devastating event of the shattering of the institution of medicine. And we're going to be living with that for quite a while. And so I don't know. That's a really bad thing where you can't really trust research papers and the like, and certain things like that. However, Ben Shapiro took their word that they had achieved success with the mRNA vaccine. And had they done this, would be akin to like a moon landing. This would be an amazing achievement, because it's not just about COVID, but it would have been about, viruses in the future. Just about any kind of disease you could think of, you could, solve. And so he went ahead and he took the vaccine and all that. Never once did he support mandates and attack that constantly. So it's like lying about the man constantly about, or insinuating and wink, wink, nudge, nudge about what he's about or what he supported, instead of just what he did. Because I can only conclude is because you don't have an argument against the man. So mad at Tucker and all that for doing the interview. A lot of the challenges, well, why don't you just debate Fuentes? And of course, the response would be, well, I don't want to platform this neo-Nazi, And I'm like, well, again, I'd say he's platformed himself, and it's a little late to worry about that. but I mean, he's debated all kinds of, idiots on the left and stuff. This one, I don't know. He may just have to go ahead and do it, you know. But yeah, he's not going to like. I mean, now he was running a bunch of clips in his response to this, and a lot of them were really old, but still, yeah, that's what the guy said. And some of it, you can always argue, and I always caution this, because how many times has someone been accused of being a Nazi? I mean, you can't count. It's just all the time. So I was like, well, is it really? I mean, hell, Ben Shapiro was accused of it, practically, at least, or perhaps metaphorically or whatever. But, how much of that is true? And what's the context of the statement? And especially when it was a bunch of scenes of the guy giggling and laughing. And I'm like, well, is he bullshitting around, or is he really doing this? But after all said and done, he does appear to be a fan of Hitler. That's like, well, he's like, come on, he's fucking around. Is he? So he's like, come on, Ben. All right, you don't have to like the guy, but come on, yeah, he ain't all bad. I just like, I don't think that's going to happen. So, and then that's another thing of the Tucker. I hadn't heard this one until I watched, the interview, was that he's a fan of Joseph Stalin. Because that's one of these things I can't remember if maybe, probably, I'm only guessing. A lot of people saying, hey, maybe we picked the wrong side in World War II, so we should have allied ourselves with Hitler to go against Stalin and the Soviets. I'm not sure what the scenario would lead you to that. Because keep in mind, people at the time didn't know the full consequences of Hitler and the Nazis, and till later, until at the end. I mean, some of them kind of had an idea, and certainly there was warning signs and what have you. But nevertheless, and the fear of communism was, warranted, and could see what it had done to Russia and so on. And so we're not so happy with that group, and more to the reason as to why Hitler probably suspected that, hey, oh, damn it, I lost my train of thought. Damn it. Well, the point is, at the outset, so the United States enters the war because of Pearl Harbor, and then Hitler declares war on the United States. That'd be interesting. What if he hadn't, but he wanted to solidify his alliance with the Japanese and had this fantasy that they were going to help him with Russia, that they could come in and attack him from the east as he attacked from the west. And but apparently what he was unaware of was the Japanese had already gone to war with the Russians in their expansion adventures, which they invaded China, they took Singapore and all this stuff. They wanted to make the Pacific Ocean a Japanese lake. And so they tried to make some incursions on Russian territory, and the Russians handed their asses to them. And so they quietly backed off and didn't really talk about it. Certainly didn't want their citizenry to understand that they just had a really severe beating, and just quietly moved on and kept their war with China going and stuff like that. Now that was Yuri Zhukov who defeated them. And really, Zhukov is the hero for the Red Army in World War II. It's not Stalin. Stalin, despite his paranoia, which you would understand considering the position he was in, a lot of people would want to kill him because he killed a lot of people to get where he was. The one man he appears to have trusted was Hitler. Everybody does. He's getting ready to invade. He's going to violate the pact that he made. Yeah, the one guy who made an alliance with the Soviet Union was Hitler.
So we were supposed to side with Hitler to get the, it doesn't make any sense narratively, especially with the events that happened, regardless of the morality and whatnot. But so Hitler, he does Barbarossa, he invades, and Stalin apparently collapses, is just broken by this. So they couldn't reach him in his office. He locked himself in there. So cooler heads had to prevail. Now you could look at the map of Russia and realize what's going to happen. And you owe that to generals like Zhukov that saved them. So, the Nazis invade. They're on their way. They're just smashing through Russia and destroying all kinds of their stuff. But what did they do? They relocated their manufacturing base and just churned out tanks constantly. And the Germans couldn't reach them. They didn't provide for a long-range bomber, at least. So since they were out of reach, the Germans could lose material and equipment in war, but the Russians could replenish it. And especially with the West coming in to attack Germany from the West, they were losing on both ends. So it was obvious how that was going to go. So, well, what a brilliant guy, huh? And then, Stalin just takes credit for all of it. But the thing about guys like Hitler and Stalin for Fuentes is basically power. That's what he's really interested in. He's enamored with power, very much like the left is. That's no way to be. Now, the power will always be your enemy. Now, yeah, but you got to use it to get it. Yeah, I know. That's the conundrum. And how much of it will it seduce you? Well, that's entirely up to you. How do because how do you deal with the likes of Stalin? And you dealt with them through power. Certainly in Hitler, overwhelming force and power and destruction to eliminate his threat. But then, what do? Do you continue on like that? After that, you made this deal with the Soviet Union. And then, of course, Patton was like, hey, man, let's just roll in there and take them out. Now we got a chance. And, I think a lot of people think, because the scourge of communism and the subversion of, KGB entities and so on and so forth. And to this day, really, come on. It's a new capitalism. No, it isn't. It's just, you just rebrand communism, call it progressive, whatever you want. And that sort of thing. So that's what, they did. And so you can understand why Patton thinking, yeah, he was right. We should have eliminated them then, and all that. Geez, I think I got the eyebrows, and that's about it. Sorry, Mr. Shapiro, I tried. So back to Shapiro himself. Says, gee, he's really positive about it. Yeah, he's Jewish. Israel means a lot to him. I believe he has family there. He had certainly friends who died in the October 7th attack. And that's another thing. He's in no mood for pussyfooting around with this stuff after that. That was a horrific, horrific attack. And for whatever reason, well, I think we know the reason. People just want to ignore that massive event, that occurred and act like, oh my God, they're attacking Gaza. And yes. And nobody can honestly answer. If you had suffered a similar situation, what would your response be? And you say, oh, well, I wouldn't have done. Yes, you would. In fact, most would probably be even worse. And yeah, I would understand that kind of atrocity. And you're in no mood to be nicey about it. And you say, well, he's too close to it or whatever. Well, what happened? Are American troops in Israel right now? Are American troops in Gaza? No, no. So that was the fear. And I can understand that to a point. Again, after the 20 years of war that ended in surrender and all that. And it can go on and on and on about the troubles that came out of that. But that's just, so you can be, oh no, this is what this is. This is what it's all been, and didn't happen. So then you have the attack on the Iran facility, which Trump tried to talk them down. That's what he does. That's what he tried to do. They told him to go fuck himself. So there it is. Then after that, we find out, well, turns out they're paper tiger. So good Lord, Iran initiates all this, gets Hamas to go ahead and pull the trigger on this attack that they did on October 7th. My God, boy, they really messed up, screwed around with the hornet's nest, Well, yeah, but because Trump's other deal, which, the Oslo Accords you hear about a lot, it was getting very close to where Arab countries, specifically Saudi Arabia, would publicly announce they're making peace with Israel. Yeah, they've been doing things with Israel, behind the scenes, but you can't say that publicly, Iran just could not have that. Now, Iran got no love for Saudi Arabia. They've been fighting a proxy war in Yemen for I don't know how long. That kind of thing. And there's, plus you got the religious aspect of it, of Sunni versus Shia, so on and so forth. But the Arabs, they got Mecca. Now, that's the holy city of Islam. What do the Iranians got? Well, nothing. But man, if they could get a hold of Jerusalem, they'd have that, huh? See, stuff like that, But this sort of, it forces their hand, but they're not ready. They don't have the hand. They really didn't. They didn't. They kept working on their nuclear program, but they didn't have it. And whatever they had just, got destroyed. They've been very quiet. I would have expected they would have activated their terror cells and stuff like that, but I guess not so much. It's been very quiet. So all of this is doomsday. This is the worst thing. And still, even afterwards, mad at Trump for doing this at the behest of Israel. Well, they talk about killing Americans all the time, and they've done it. They've done it a lot. Ever since 1979, this has been going on with Iran in America. Yeah, Israel is part of this because of our alliance with them. But a lot of this goes back to the days of, again, it's left over from the Cold War. And, we had a client in the Shah of Iran as a bulwark against the Soviets screwing around in that area, trying to garner their foothold over the oil and that sort of thing. And then, they managed to help out and instigate, the Islamic Revolution in Iran. And they've held America responsible for that. And yeah, there was someone else who didn't like America. Oh, yeah, the Soviets. So you see how this plays out. Yeah. How can that be? I mean, the communists are godless. Yeah, well, how do you explain Mayor Mamdani? It's just whatever's convenient. And we'll settle up with them later. That kind of thing. So that's how this plays out. And Iran, going on, and then, it's like, well, they get their nuke, but they're not going to use it. Yeah, that's the strategy, isn't it? So he tried to make a deal, tried to talk him down. They wouldn't do it. So there you go. And it was a desperate effort as to why they wanted to stir shit up, get Israel in a war with the Palestinians, and hopefully enough that would shatter any attempts. And that's still an open question. Now, they came together for this peace deal. By the way, yeah, there was a ceasefire by the, It's funny how there's crickets over that, especially since what did the Palestinians do? Well, they went out and started murdering their own people. Yeah, well, okay. Crickets over that as well. I thought that was the concern, but well. So nevertheless, we'll see how it goes. Now, leadership and whatnot of Saudi Arabia, they know the deal, but there's the populace to think about. And they've been preaching anti-Israel stuff from, even before 48, and tonight you're going to say, hey, you know what? Never mind that. They're good guys. It's fine. It's tough. But they're in a better position with them against the enemies in Iran. Of course, now Iran has been deeply humbled. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing to observe. But is it worth all this crap that's going on over here? No. Calling Ben Shapiro a traitor and a warmonger and all that, it's unfounded. It's just people are mad at him about, like I said, the vaccine, mad at him. A lot of it really sparked when he just wouldn't get on the Trump train in 2016. And it's easy to take him at his word based on his back, his history and whatnot. He didn't trust Trump. He thought Trump was, full of crap. Had been a Democrat most of his life, wasn't trusting that either, and decided, well, I just don't have a candidate. Unlike some never Trumpers who voted for Hillary. My point of it is Hillary was a serious threat, and I thought, Ben was making a mistake on that. But it's his vote, his choice, so he didn't do it. Trump comes in, Ben's like, well, what do you know? He's better than I ever could have hoped for. So there you go. And then it has been supporting him ever since. Critical when he thinks he's messing up, and that's normal. That happens. None of these people are gods, And so I don't know what else there is. He's supposed to convert. Let's say he did. He'd probably still hate him. I don't know. I mean, some of that was like, gee, is it the whiny voice and stuff? I don't know. But they just, I want daily water to fill. And then what? So, so much of it is much ado about nothing, and yet, good Lord, look at what it's able to do. So, yeah. As far as his take on Fuentes, I don't know the entire context of those clips. They didn't look good, but quite a few of them were like really old, and then some looked like, well, probably last week. I don't know. But could he have taken things out of context? That's deceptive on Ben's part. Does Ben watch Fuentes' show? I doubt it. So they get a bunch of clips of him talking about his praise of Hitler, his questioning the Holocaust, which he did. He talked about cookies and all that stuff. And that's another one that goes a long ways. And he just doesn't know what he's talking about. Or if he does, well, that's even worse, because he's lying. But nevertheless, yeah. There's never going to be a handshake moment between the two. And does it have to be? I don't really think so. But a debate with Tucker Carlson, that maybe you could arrange that. But probably not. But again, to Shapiro's credit, he said, no, not going to cancel them. And just, I don't want to have anything to do with them, so that's fair. He's not talking about debanking people. He's not talking about, Twitter or Google has to, eliminate them from all platforms, impossible for them to conduct a show, broadcast, what have you. No, he didn't do that. So there you go. So finally, well, not finally, that brings us to Mark Levin. Yeah. I always like Mark Levin. He's funny guy, and he's a scrappy dude with his attitude towards the show, and somebody's always coming in, would try to give him crap, and then they would kind of stumble around and yeah. So it's kind of funny, and he's almost got like a Mel Blanca voice sometimes, Um, but here again, big fan of Israel. He's a proud Jew and all that. And so, no shocking surprise as far as that goes. But he was also, he's been a very patriotic American. I just don't see how you're going to argue he wasn't, unless you lie about it. Yeah. Now, when it came to Kay, he flat out saying, "You're damn right I'm going to cancel him. It's called the marketplace." Now, what he's talking about there is, the marketplace. So a lot of times the left was, you don't like cancel culture, but you're condemning, whatever the latest dumb Star Wars thing is. Yeah, because it's no good, and I'll have to go watch it. You don't have to participate in shows. You don't have to go see a show. So, I mean, the basic thing is you don't have to subscribe or what have you to the likes of Nick Fuentes. You don't have to subscribe and that sort of thing to the likes of Tucker Carlson. That's the point he's making, which is true. He doesn't. People can put demands on him. You need to debate them. If you don't, you're a pussy. Well, he doesn't have to do that either. And I can see the point because I think in an actual real debate, certainly the historical significance and whatnot of this whole deal, certainly when it applies to Israel and whatnot, Shapiro and Levin would do very well on that. But October 7th happened. And it's going to do a number on people. There's emotion aplenty, and a lot of times, like part of the problems with the left was emotion was all they ever did. And any kind of logic battles or discussions or whatever just never was allowed into the room. Because, I don't know, I guess, logic and whatnot was a white supremacist a patriarchal social construct, And I'm making Mark Levin look younger than Shapiro. I don't know how to do it. But that was the deal. And so, but yeah, we're human beings, and emotion's going to play a strong part in this. And once you screw somebody over or you give them a bad taste in their mouth about you, it's very difficult to come back from that. And I mean, with Nick Fuentes, it's impossible. I mean, you're going on about how awesome Hitler was. Again, it looks like he's giggling and laughing about it. Does he really mean it? At this point, I guess he does. I don't know. But so, yeah, don't expect, Mark Levin to go, well, all right, maybe I should give this kid a chance. What are you, stupid? That's not going to happen. So, but as far as if the overall argument is that Tucker should never have talked to him or he platformed him, I think it's a weak argument, especially since everybody already knows who Fuentes is. If people are interested in Fuentes, they're going to find him. That's why the debate thing becomes the part. You can win the argument because I don't think Fuentes has one. As much as he was making fun of Candace Owens and her crazy crap, about everything at this point. he's got his own version of that. That everything wrong was because, well, Jews have a stranglehold over the country or some crap like that, and that's his go-to for everything. Well, yeah, that's not going to work because it isn't true. And but a good bit of this, again, I'm sure for Levin being older, he's probably heard it 1 trillion times. Ben Shapiro heard it 1 billion times. And all this sort of stuff. Again, I gotta go through this argument again. And that's probably the attitude. I would suspect oh boy, I'm not doing it. Well, Photoshop would have to fix this if I put these in color, because his hair is white. Yeah, I know most of his hair is gone, but what's left is white. Yeah. So he just flat out says, "You damn right I'm going to deplatform you," but that has a specific meaning, especially after what the left did. That's deplatforming. For as much as what problems I would have with Nick's take on things, he hasn't done anything to deserve being debanked. He talks his shit. He can talk his shit. If people don't like it, they don't have to listen to it. That was always the case. Now, once you make it not the case, well, then where does it stop? And there's always been people saying, I don't know, really 6 million, come on, and that sort of thing. And the problem of saying, he's got to be shut down. He can't be saying stuff like that. Well, that's going to create people thinking, well, no, he can say it. It doesn't mean it's true. Unless maybe it is. And then that's going to create that. I think that's a serious problem there. I can understand the anger. I can understand the disgust. But short of actual death threats, I don't see how you can, certainly not constitutionally, which Levin knows way more than I do on that. But again, he didn't suggest that there has to be some sort of, like power has to do it, or government power has to go and shut down Nick Fuentes' ability to speak or broadcast his show and all that sort of thing. He just says, I'm going to, dump shit on them and tell people, you don't want to have anything to do with this creep. And, and that's his take on it. And then if nobody goes to watch his show, well, then that's that. And he won't grow any further than he already has. And that's what I took from that. I didn't take that he's going to do like the left did. Go move through financial institutions like BlackRock and, and force behaviors or, that crap. And not really seeing that from Levin in his statement. He's very angry. This hits close to home, especially in recent events. And then this little snot comes here. He's going to question my patriotism, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I perfectly understand that. Because, a terrible thing did happen to Fuentes, and not just being debanked and whatnot. But so far, nothing on par about a Hamas attack and that sort of thing. So, and it's going to hit close to home for the likes of Levin. And rooting for another country's war that doesn't necessarily involve your own, that's his right. You shouldn't do that. You don't get to decide that. And he can make his case for it. That is also his right. People agree with him and think, yeah, you're right. We need to side with Israel. Then he's won the argument. You can't just go, well, Jews this and Jews that. Yeah. But the other part of it is, we can't go the cancel route as far as, actual force. People choosing not to have anything to do with them. Yes, you can do that. That's fine. Because in the auspices of liberty, well, you got to trust the people to figure things out. You got to trust thought. You can weigh argument such that there are. Most of this is fight, not really argument. So that's what happens there. Jeez. I mean, I don't think it's that bad of a drawing, but man, he looks a lot younger in the drawing. I mean, damn. I mean, it's doing better than some. I mean, some of these, I'm going to draw so and so. It's just absolute crap. So far, so good, I guess. I don't know. Let me see here. Probably should look at the chat. Nodak says drawing looks great. Well, thanks. Yeah, I guess compared to some of the others I've done, it's looking all right. Especially with the Levin. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'll color these in Photoshop and probably touch that up a bit. Yeah, I guess it's all right. I mean, I was thinking because I kind of messed up in darkening the hair on the side because his hair is completely white. But anyway, Nodak says, "Wait, you're not God?" I know, contrary to popular belief, but no, I'm not. Neither is Rocco, by the way. Susan Dolan says, hail. Everybody's saying hi. Mark XRB says, nice job. Everybody's saying hi. Susan Dolan, the Soviet Union had one rifle to every 3 men. They had next to nothing in ammunition. Once they used up all their bullets, they had no other option except to run. Soviet winter killed more Nazis. Well, to a certain extent, but they had them surrounded at Stalingrad, and the Nazis ran out of supplies. And ultimately, once those tanks came off, and they literally had massive tank battles between the two, and to the point that they were ramming each other and stuff like that. So yes, the winter, which was the lesson that Napoleon had to learn, and for whatever reason, they just ignored it. But nevertheless, but the manufacturing base being relocated went a long way to show the folly of the attempt. Now, again, had they had long-range bombers, well, might have gone differently. I don't know. Nodak, Doug should have been a history teach-it. Oh, yeah, that was one of the things I considered, I think I got lazy though, because when pursuing degrees in college, you had to have at least one foreign language class to pass, and I sucked at it. I tried French, did a little better than that, and then I tried Spanish, which everyone says is the easier one. Oh God, I had to drop out of the class. It was so bad. I was terrible. Then I was like, well, I guess it's art or nothing. And I went into art, but it turned out to be I'm nothing. So the whole thing in the Middle East is there's Sunnis and Shiite Muslims, think Catholics and Protestants, sort of, yes. And Sunni Muslims have various denominations, right? And the Saudis think others are infidel here. Yes. It's like, if there just was no Israel, it would be peace and love there. No. No. Nodak looks like Oswald Cobblepot. Which one? You mean the penguin? Thompson, audio great. Oh, that's a good thing. Because boy, oh boy, when I feel stupid, like all the other times, Nodak also could be a nerdy Mersh. I'm sure Mersh will just love that. Captain Infinity Time Travel Police offers a cup of tea. That's nice. All right, let me go ahead and erase the pencil from Mr. Levin. And Levin, probably even more so than Shapiro, is an excellent asset on the Constitution, both historically and the legal terms and whatnot. But I'm supposed to believe he's a part of this sinister cabal that's determined to destroy us all. No, sorry. Well, not sorry, really. I mean, it's just come on. There's only so much stupid one can take, and gee, why even go for it? Well, I've touched on it earlier, but guess I'll get into that for our final character, Little Nick Fuentes himself. I don't know if he's little or not. I mean, he's skinny, but hell, I don't know. He might be as tall as me, 6'3". I don't know. But anyway, so damn it, I gotta get my pictures in order. There he is. He's a young whippersnapper, and burst onto the scene. Of course, Anthony Cumia and Gavin McGinnis are enamored with him. He's had some funny sayings here and there. Most recently, a joke that nearly got him killed. So that's part of the things. It's not always a day at the beach for the guy. So some crazy fat leftist woman got mad at him because he tweeted out, "Your body, my choice." I mean, it's not even really that big of a deal of a joke, but yeah, it was. Look, it's funny. Plus, it's true. I mean, if someone's not attracted to you, odds are they're not going to date you. There's got to be something. You got to get the ball rolling some kind of way. But anyway, this, who obviously just, didn't like him to begin with, I guess saw it. So she decided to dox him, put his address out there, and that sort of thing. And, he's a horrible person, all this sort of stuff. And so so then some psychopath who had already murdered, I think, 2 other people, also saw this address of Nick's, went to his house looking obviously to kill him. He was armed and was looking to go in there and kill the guy. Didn't happen. He ended up going to Nick's neighbors and killed their dogs, and then ended up in a shootout with the police. And so there you go. Obviously, this should never have happened, but it did. Because he said shit, and even that is like to think that after everything, had this guy actually been successful showing up and killing him, that it wasn't his Holocaust denial or praising Hitler and all that. No, it was some dumb joke about Your body, my choice. And boy, that's yeah. So anyway, now obviously the nut, whatever his motives are, well, the guy was a nut. Committed these other murders, showed up at his house, obviously with the intent to kill him. And I guess maybe the guy thought, oh well, people will have praise for me if I kill him. This will be like I think he even brought that up in Tucker's interview about similar to people celebrating Mangione, for killing the health insurance executive in New York. And maybe that was the thinking. It's possible, but that's what happened there. So, and gee, what effect that could? Well, obviously, security and whatnot. He's got to be a little more angry at people saying he's the problem, But there again, that's not obviously not Shapiro or Levin or whoever else. That's the left, But his emphasis remains on the right. So make of it what you will, I suppose. Hey, this is probably going to be the worst picture. I'm not getting this right at all. So what is the deal? I don't know much else about him. What's his family background? We'd have to assume that had some influence on him. It usually does for, well, everybody. And something of that nature. He does tell the story about him asking Ben Shapiro, why are there no articles on Daily Wire that are critical of Israel? And Ben Shapiro immediately snaps that that's an anti-Semite question or what have you. And so that's it. He's done. Oh, well, there's too much of a Jewish influence on the dialogue and certainly over America overall. And so, gee, it all comes back to that's the ultimate problem for the country, and it's a downfall. And now this was a long one where a lot of people just blame Jews overall for communism and whatnot. You're not going to be able to make a case that the likes of Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro are pro-communist. And despite the Jews that did suffer under those regimes just as much as any other. So the communism is the sort of thing that humanity falls for. It's a con. It is, the free lunch. And that we're all gonna share alike, and its only success is through division. Divide people by class originally, primarily at the outset. Divide them by religion. Divide them by sex. Divide them by race. However you got to do it, and you fall into that. Now it is of some interest to note this as well. Nick Fuentes certainly would be aware of that, and I don't know that he's gone on into. I would assume that Jews are responsible for communism and whatnot. At the same time, praises Joseph Stalin. Now, Joseph Stalin, well, he wasn't Jewish, so it doesn't matter, So I'm not entirely certain what the reason one would be so enamored with him overall, opposed to, I don't know, anyone else. However, what's the explanation for it? Again, like perhaps, obviously, I don't know what all his background is. Maybe there was a lot of family members saying, yeah, really, everything was fine until the Jews came along or whatever. Something of that nature perhaps had an influence on him. that he didn't give it much thought. He did talk in that interview that he was actually a big fan of Mark Levin, but decided, oh well, all Mark Levin cares about is Israel, and that set him off. And he latched onto that as the main explanation for anything that's whatever the problems America faces. It's it's just got to be that Israeli influence. It's APAC, and goes on with the America First argument, and kind of hides behind that in a way, you know, because one of the things that's the mistakes that I think the likes of Shapiro and Levin is no one gives the strategic arguments about it. I mean, and now to be fair, they probably have, and I missed it, but it's never really the go-to. Israel occupies a strategic location in the overall shipping lanes that are of vital importance to. Man, is this out of ink? It is. God, I'm live, and you do this to me. His ears over here, so I'm going to have to fix the other one. But that remains the case, and for the certainly, yes, the oil and whatnot, but just everything. And you can't, geez, this was going out too. Hang on a minute. I cannot believe this happened right in front of everybody. Good Lord. What are you doing to me? I tried to do my drawings this hour, and then you run out of ink. How many times have I told you, stupid pins, not to run out of ink? Jeez, I hope no one heard that. So yeah, that's always been in play. You got the Suez, so we make deals with Egypt. It's the United States that got them to make peace with Israel, which got Sadat killed by his own people who didn't like it, but nevertheless, the deal holds. Individuals within don't feel it that way. Of course, it still continues, but for the most part, they're not actively going after Israel anymore. They were involved in the wars against them, but then that was the end of it. So then there's the Strait of Hormuz and all that shipping lanes of vital elements that say, well, we can do without. Can we? Yeah. And so that's what people talk about America's interests. Now, there's all kinds of corruption. There's people take advantage of it. And that's not about being great for America and all that. But nevertheless, the situation still holds. And I don't really hear any counter to it ever as to how you get around that. Now, that being said, there is something on the horizon that, thanks to climate change, there could be the long sought after northern passage. That climate change and technology, of course, and that we can traverse the northern passage. That's over the Arctic. They've been tried to do that. It's a way to access China and Japan, the Pacific, all that, Russia and what have you, without even having to even bother with the Mediterranean and whatnot. You're still going to deal with it. You're still going to deal with that. You want to travel, but still, even through the passage, you get to the Pacific, and you can make that a trip to the likes of the Indian Ocean and all that, Australia, all that stuff, without ever having to worry about the passages with the Mediterranean, dealing with the piracy that happens there, so on and so forth. But that's not the case at the moment, and it hasn't been forever. So you don't really have any of that. The massive emotion towards that's why no one can conclude anything other than, okay, so you don't like Jews. And it's gonna there's, I don't know how else you make the case. I mean, he was mad at Matt Walsh for not taking a stand on all this. He's supposed to side, I guess, with Fuentes against Shapiro. And he was ranting and raving and says, they're the ones who made this about anti-Semitism. I didn't. Well, but that's not true. I mean, your case is that it's an overwhelming Jewish influence on the American policy, and beyond just Israel. You know, I mean, all right. Again, to be fair, I don't know that he goes with everything that's wrong has been some sort of Jewish plot to undermine America and that sort of thing. You see a lot of that all kind of degeneracy that America is suffering these days was introduced by Jewish people, so on and so forth. And then that's the plot. But for the most part, mostly hearing about him, praising Hitler, and then and Joseph Stalin for whatever reason, and then AIPAC's influence, and it's all about in service to Israel, where, hey, why not just care about America instead of some other country? But there are other countries that have a lot of influence over the United States, and got a lot of our so-called representatives in their back pocket and stuff. Don't seem to care too much about them. It's not a lot of emphasis on that. And, he says, well, I just don't like that they're killing kids and committing genocide. They did. When you go off into leftist terminology and stuff, then I got to really question it. It's just like, I just want the emphasis to be on America. Well, stick with that. There's no genocide. They had a war. They got attacked. They responded to it. Damn good and well, you'd probably be even more brutal if someone did that to you. The apartheid question, that never held water. You can't have members of a different ethnicity holding office, certainly not having the right to vote in your society, if you're going to be an apartheid state. So I don't know. Well, Jimmy Carter said, yeah, so what? As far as the Palestinians, well, they had a deal in the 90s. Should have took it. Arafat said no, responded with 2 years of murder. I mean, that was really it. After that, there's really no more argument. I don't know what else there is to do. And then after this, well, we got to get back to the two-state solution and everything. And there, I don't know that Nick delves into any of that. If he just said, I just want America to be the main focus and everything, and he could make his cases here, but there's plenty of other avenues to make a case like that than Israel. But as far as I know, and I could be wrong about this, he doesn't really do that. Everything comes back to Israel and just Jewry, as he calls it. And then, of course, he goes off into epithets and attacks J.D. Vance, his wife, and stuff like that. And it's like, well, and that's like, how serious is the guy? I would assume somewhat. I mean, like I said, he almost got killed by some weirdo. But you throw that around, and it's just like no one's going to hear you after that. I mean, your guys, your crowd, your groypers or whatever, whatever the hell. Sure, they'll hear it, but you're not going to advance further than that. And if you're genuinely concerned about influence and whatnot, you've pretty much boxed yourself in. where you are. So that's that. But Gavin McInnes and Anthony Cumia seem to be enamored with the guy. I guess they like talking to him and hanging out because, he can be funny and all that. And especially on Gavin's part, I mean, Gavin, he's an avowed Zionist. He's one of those Christian scientists that Tucker despises, but only out of anger for a minute. Okay, so he said, whoops. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have said it out loud like that. So, hey, Dave Smith, you got a minute for me to correct that? Oh, and there you go. It's all good. But it's interesting and all that. And of course, they know more about him than I do as far as Fuentes goes. But that's a lot of shit to throw on the table and then get upset when someone complains about the smell of what he did. Nobody made him do it. He wanted to. That's what he believes. And ultimately, you'd have to be conspiratorial or what have you to say that it was a planned thing or whatever. Of course, these days, maybe so. I don't know. But, he was able to have dinner with Donald Trump because of Kanye West. And so for the left's purposes, there we go. We got him now. Trump had dinner with a white supremacist. So, and that's all they cared about. And it didn't do anything. Because it's pretty obvious. Trump didn't know who the hell Nick Fuentes was. I guess he probably does now. But it was like, hey, what is all this? Come back. So I guess Nick's still mad at him because he bombed Iran. And said, hey, I just don't like that, children are getting killed. Well, I can understand that. But hey, they finally got the most long sought after ceasefire. And then Hamas went and slaughtered their own people. Anything? Not a whole lot. I hear about Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin. Then, of course, you got to go through the rants of Tucker Carlson and Fuentes and all that. But, so maybe he did. Maybe he did again, And he said, and then, you just stick with oh, damn, look at that. I screwed up the damn drawing. Son of a, well, that was not intentional. I know I'm crapping on the guy at the moment, but I mean, I can fix it in Photoshop. But, so anyway, there you go. I guess that'll do. I'll let it dry a little more before I take all the pencils out, So, but I the whole thing unfolds like that, and that was the big thing about, hey, come on. I mean, it's like Hamas attacks, and then the next day, okay, we need a ceasefire. It's like, no, you don't work that way. And then, they get the ceasefire. And, still everyone's mad. So, and of course, Hamas celebrates by murdering their own people. So, what but as far as this goes, not a lot there. If he was just a guy that was just bullshitting around and did raunchy jokes, I've done raunchy jokes, some of which I feel like I probably shouldn't have. But not on his level. Good Lord. And it's like, hey, look, you're taking him out of context and stuff. Yeah, but because you made it so easy. So I doubt that there's going to be this greater context overall. This is, see, they got it all wrong. So I don't know. That like Matt Walsh was talking about, hey, come on, we got to stop this fighting one another. The left is the more serious threat, and we got to come together on this. And they're not going to come together with Fuentes. They're not. Tucker and Candace, forget it. And Tucker, yeah, probably not. I think that's probably it. Now, the overall thing, mad at Tucker just because he talked to Fuentes, that's not the problem. And if you're going to keep doing that, you've lost the argument. It's not an argument. Yes, he can talk to the man. He can have him on his show. You can criticize how it went because he didn't really hold Fuentes' feet to the fire on anything. He just said, hey, what's your story, Nick? Well, and that's about it. Then he drops a turd on the table about the Christian Zionists and says, I despise them more than ever. See, that's Tucker. See, that's not Fuentes. Man, Fuentes probably, yeah, you're right. I didn't really, maybe, I can't remember. I don't think he did. I said, something like that. But, but don't worry. He cleared that up and said, I was mad with Dave Smith. He says, I didn't really mean it. Well, I don't know. So I don't know who else is left for Matt Walsh saying, hey, we got to come together and deal with this, because I'm more worried about the influence of the left and that sort of stuff. And there's a truth about that. It's looking pretty bad for the left. The old guard is rotting as we speak and are going. And we've got this whole new fresh crop of young communists, gaining positions in authority and all of that. And as stupid as they sound, as ridiculous as their ideas are and everything, look how far they've come. Look what they did. I mean, this past 5 years alone. Holy crap. Don't underestimate them. But hey, let's take time to, so how long does this thing continue or erupt? It could all end next week. Something else, they just had the election, so that'll probably take some things. And it kind of fades. David Duke faded. Spencer, good Lord. He came and went, immediately endorsed Biden. I mean, you already got Fuentes here talking about how much he's a fan of Stalin. I mean, what the hell is that? So, I mean, it could fade pretty quickly. Or not, And it's hard not to think, maybe he is a Fed, and this is to destroy the right from within, Perhaps, but at the same time, the following is real. So there's people who think this way. And it all comes back to, look, people like Nick, people even younger than him, the last 20 years, 20 years of war that ended in defeat and surrender. That's a hard thing to go through. And then your trust in institutions completely shattered. And then COVID, one more big smack in the teeth, And all of your institutions are shattered. You don't trust or believe anyone. You don't know what to do. You don't know who. And then, here comes somebody. Hey, man, I got it. And he says it's the Jews. And he's going to scoop some up. Lost people don't know what to make of this, especially young men, attacked for being, men. All this sort of thing. And then white people, racism against white people is completely and utterly accepted institutionally. And this went on for a very long time. It's as if the likes of Shapiro didn't acknowledge this. He did. But, but that's the explanation of why people end up where they are. It doesn't excuse some of the things Fuentes believes and says and how far out he went. I mean, he's a cleaned up version in Tucker's interview. Like I said, Tucker came off worse. But it's like, really? I guess the answer is yes. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. But I think that goes a long way of where people are. It's like, God damn, you really fall for this? Well, they've been beaten down a lot. And but someone doesn't immediately say what they want, they lose their minds over it. So if Shapiro's not on board, I don't know, with Trump at the time, now he's, he went out of his way to get Trump reelected. All that sort of stuff. Still back and forth on the tariffs. Really need to look into that, because some of the elements of the tariff and trade war, it didn't go as so-called experts say it would. It actually will a bit more beneficial. How long can that go? Well, we'll see. But for the longest time, Shapiro was one of those, that's not a good idea. Well, he's just been Shapiro. He too is not God. So he's going to make mistakes. And these scenarios haven't played out like they have before. You can't go back 100 years ago when they did then and then say it's going to be the same thing here. In some ways, yes, in some others, but that's a whole other complicated matter, and so on. But as far as jump to something as stupid as the Jews did, everything, if you stubbed your toe in the night, the Jews did it, is absurd. Beyond just the immorality of it, the harm it does, and stuff like that. And of course, for an actual Jew, it's really going to piss them off to the point that, hey, they're being emotional. Yes. Of course. And to go to that, I mean, you'd almost have to conclude, well, I guess the Jews are like the X-Men. They have supernatural powers. It doesn't work like that. And so an individual argument for something policy-wise as to what Israel would do, all right, well, let's hear that. During the 90s, I had sympathies for the Palestinians. I said, because Israel was saying, well, because that's back when the settlements were a big deal, and even more so than today, even though they still act like nothing was ever done about it. I mean, in West Bank, they're still doing that, but nevertheless, the idea was like, well, hey, you're building these settlements on this land. The Israeli argument was, well, it's disputed territory. That's a weak argument. If it's disputed, you can't really build something like, say, a house as foundational as that. And of course, ultimately what happened when they made their deal and concessions to the Palestinians for Gaza, the IDF went in there and forcibly removed Jews out of their homes, saying, we're done. We're leaving Gaza. You can't stay here. They didn't like that, but that's the deal they made. And they went through with it. It's all forgotten now, except, by the Israelis, but nevertheless, nothing. No. All right. So, that's how that works out. Oh, gee, it's not fun. It's really bad at times. I know. But losing your head and just going off into one direction like that, and with no real case to be made, it's irresponsible and ultimately becomes evil. You should want to avoid that. All right. I'm not getting any super tips. Well. Captain Infinity Time Travel Police. Hello, Susan. Yes, my simple guide to Middle East religion. Captain Infinity Time Travel Police. Start with Sunni Delight. Oh, is that what it is? Good Lord. Susan Dolan, a gal at my church, used to be a teacher. For her college degree, she did a paper on the Dominican monks. The Dominicans, in order to make Christianity more palatable to Jews, removed Christ from the Gospels. Big mistake, because a Jew named Karl Marx got a hold of it and created communism. So to punish communists for discriminating against Christians, the Dominicans created Nazis to punish them. No, that's not how that plays. I don't deny people. Lots of people rewrote the Bible. There was a guy who I'm forgetting his name. Sorry, wanted the Old Testament completely removed in any mention of it and re-edited the Gospel so it did. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. This one, as far as that, Karl Marx was a Jew, but he had no fondness of Judaism or any of that. He was an atheist and believed that he was the bee's knees of thought and whatnot, and did it all, well, not on his own. Engels had more of an influence over that anyway. But anyway, notwithstanding Dominicans or what have you, and anti-Semitism was a long, centuries scourge of Europe, and the likes of Hitler grew up in that, so it's not one guy makes it all happen. Susan Dolan, bad move on their part because the Nazis also discriminated against the Christians as well. Well, yes. I mean, ultimately you get to like Himmler, who, he hated Christianity. Why? Because he said, hey, Christianity is Jewish. He was like, oh, that's how they undermine. We need to go back to worshiping Thor and stuff like that. And that's what he believed. He wanted to revive the old pagan religions because he said that's more German. Yeah. It's funny how all that happens, So Arno05, howdy people. Hi, Arno. Well, here's the drawings I did. And again, that was an accident. I did not mean for that to be there. I'll fix it later. So we have Mark Levin. We have Ben Shapiro. And then we have Tucker Carlson looking like, what happened? Huh? I don't know. Something like that. So there you go. Oh boy, wasn't that fun? I drew all these pictures. Hey, that's something. Probably do something, I don't know, later tonight. Of course, I got to do the pop culture breakdown. There's a lot of different stuff of late. They're going to make a new Mummy. This will be the Mummy 4, reuniting Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. I don't know if they'll talk about that. More rumblings about James Gunn being done with the DCU. Paramount says they're not going to do any more Kelvin Star Trek movies. They're going to do something else entirely. So there's that. That's been hanging around for I don't know how long. Finally, they have announced, well, not finally, they got one more. Oh, no. Finally, they've announced that, yes, they are working on a sequel to Godzilla Minus Zero, one of the best damn films in recent years. No doubt about it. And they're going to call it Godzilla Minus Zero. So Godzilla Minus One, Godzilla Minus Zero. So anyway, you look forward to that. So maybe that'll be discussed. I don't know, but I'll find out. Probably at the same time you do. But anyway, there we go. That's my drawing stream. There'll be another one. And hopefully you'll join me for that too. So, I guess that's it. Have a good night, everybody, and a good rest of your day. And we'll meet again someday. Probably soon. Let's hope it works out that way, because that would be nice. It would, wouldn't it? I got to keep vamping and talking like I have more to say when I really don't, because it's taken me a while to scroll to my end theme song. It's what I'm doing. And oh no, now the streaming platform freezes on me as I try to scroll to it. Oh boy, that's always fun too, isn't it? But now here it is. I've got it. So now I can bid you sweet adieu, and we'll visit again soon. Thanks for watching, and have a good rest of your day.